From Washington, D.C., this is the Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Assalamu alaikum, I'm Hena Zuberi. First, the headlines. Kyle Rittenhouse found not guilty in Kenosha shooting. House passes President Biden's $1.9 trillion Build Back Better bill. Poll shows Biden approval ratings plummet to an all-time low of 36%. Taliban victory sparks hopes of peace in rural Afghanistan. Sikh Gurdwaras and Hindu neighbors offer Muslim space for Friday prayers in India. From Greece to Hungary, those who help migrants face risks. Our top story tonight. Kyle Rittenhouse killed 2 people and injured a third at protests last year in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Outside the courtroom dwelling, chants by protesters described the crystallization of a divided America. Black Lives Matter, one group shouts. Self-defense is not a crime, the other responds. Justin Blake was at the courthouse. He's the uncle of Jacob Blake, whose shooting by a white police officer sparked protests. Protest attended by a gun-wielding Rittenhouse. Blake said, "I just want the nation to know, the nation that you live now isn't the nation of the United States that we used to live in." Here is a report about the case by Saliha Farouk.
And it is my decision now that I announce today before you that no Kenosha law enforcement officer in this case will be charged with any criminal offense based on the facts and the laws as I will describe them to you now. So it is our decision that no charge will be filed.
He is Michael Gravely, Kenosha County District Attorney. As America was marching for Black Lives Matter, blacks keep getting shot by police. On August 23, 2020, Jacob S. Blake, a 29-year-old black man, was shot 7 times in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Police officer Rustin Shesky shot Blake in the back 4 times and on the side 3 times. Blake was paralyzed but was still handcuffed to the hospital bed. That inhumanity ignited protest. Kenosha declared a state of emergency overnight on August 24th after police vehicles were damaged. Armed militiamen showed up in the name of protecting businesses. Among them was a 17-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse. He came from the neighboring state of Illinois. He brought an AR-15 style semi-automatic rifle. On August 25th, he killed 2 white protesters and injured a third one. He was arrested the next day and charged with first-degree intentional homicide. Why did Rittenhouse go to Kenosha? Why did he take a semi-automatic rifle with him? Why did he shoot unarmed men? He says he went to protect a business. Isn't that the job of the police? Why was he taking the law into his hands? How was he able to join other armed white males that evening? Was he a part of some militia? Was he responding to a call? His defense lawyers argue the shootings were in self-defense. No one might have died that night if Rittenhouse had not showed up with his semi-automatic rifle. He says the rifle looked cool. U.S. civilians own 303 million guns. We have more guns than people, and the number is rising. Gun sales in the United States rose 40% last year to 39,695,315. Guns, guns, and more guns. While we are less safe, U.S. murder rates rose 30% between 2019 and 2020.
President Joe Biden, in the midst of a very negative rating, received good news on Friday. The House passed the $1.9 trillion social spending and climate change bill. House progressives and Democrats worked together to give this victory to President Biden. Now, Democratic Senators Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema, who disagree with some of the bill's provisions, will have an opportunity to trim the historic bill down. Republican House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy pushed back the vote from Thursday night with a record-breaking 8.5-hour speech. The bill still passed. U.S. President Joe Biden's approval rating dipped to an all-time low of 36%, according to a poll released on Thursday. The finding is on par with last month's Quinnipiac University's poll, dropping 1 percentage point since October. Biden is facing his lowest approval ratings on record for his handling of the coronavirus pandemic, climate change, the economy, and foreign policy. A top fundraiser for former President Donald Trump boasted of raising $3 million to support the January 6th rally. Caroline Wren revealed she distributed funds to a number of political organizations backing the event that turned into a deadly riot by Trump supporters. That includes giving money to the Tea Party Express and Turning Point. According to ProPublica, as much as $3 million may have been raised to support the rally, which preceded the attack on the U.S. Capitol. It also says some of the money flowed to Republican dark money groups that helped bring crowds to the event. Wren is a former top fundraiser for Trump's campaign who managed the distribution of some of the money raised to support the rally. A newly released report reveals that the Pentagon leadership twice directed the D.C. National Guard's commanding general to send in troops as violence engulfed the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. That contradicts the now retired general's claim that he would have responded to the riot more quickly if officials in former President Donald Trump's administration had allowed it. Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy first told Major General William Walker by phone at 4:35 p.m. that he was authorized to send troops to Capitol Hill. He again called the general to reissue the deployment order about 30 minutes later. An unidentified Army witness told investigators with the Defense Department. The report includes a timeline of events that day, assembled by the Inspector General's office, confirming the separate calls. Speaking at News Corp's annual meeting Wednesday, Fox News co-founder Rupert Murdoch said conservatives must play an active role in the future of education, welfare, and economic opportunity. He added that won't happen if former President Donald Trump stays focused on the past. Less than a month ago, the Wall Street Journal opinion section published a letter from Trump again claiming the election was rigged. Trump often turned to Fox News anchor Maria Bartiromo to complain about how the election might have been stolen. Fox News is being sued by Dominion Voting Systems for making false claims about the election system, company's role in last year's presidential election. But the conservative media company defends its election coverage. Milwaukee City Attorney Tierman Spencer's hiring of a lawyer who worked for anti-Muslim groups has drawn condemnation from Muslim advocacy and other religious groups. In a Journal Sentinel video, Special Deputy City Attorney Celia Jackson said, "People hold different views." This was in response to criticism over the hiring of Assistant City Attorney Jennifer DeMaster. In a letter Wednesday, the group questioned whether it would be acceptable to hire staff who have worked to suppress the constitutional rights of Black Americans or Jewish Americans. DeMaster worked as a legal analyst for the Clarion Project from 2015 to 2017. That is one of the major proponents of Islamophobia in the United States. The Southern Poverty Law Center lists Clarion as an anti-Muslim group. DeMaster previously worked as a law clerk at the American Center for Law and Justice, where she prepped attorneys on Sharia law and, according to her, radical Islamic ideology. The U.S. State Department issued its designation of countries of particular concern regarding religious freedom yesterday. Secretary of State Antony Blinken announced the designations as part of the department's yearly review of religious freedom rights violations in countries worldwide. That is based on assessments made by the independent U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, or USCIRF. Countries included in the list this year are Burma, China, Iran, Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, and North Korea. But USCIRF Chair Nadine Maenza said that the organization was disappointed that the State Department did not adopt its recommendation in designating countries that are the worst violators of religious freedom. These include India, Vietnam, Syria, and Nigeria. Nigeria was removed from the list this year. The designations do not require the U.S. government to engage in specifics or binding sanctions or other actions. The U.S. sanctioned and charged 2 Iranian nationals Thursday for allegedly carrying out a hacking campaign compromising confidential voter information on a state website. Syed Mohammad Hussein Musa Kazemi and Sajjad Kashian were accused of being part of a group that used voter information to send threatening emails to intimidate voters. They're accused of separately carrying out a multifaceted campaign to sway the polls, the Justice Department said in a statement. That includes creating and spreading videos that supposedly reveal election infrastructure vulnerabilities and successfully gaining access to a USA media outlet's computer network. The FBI and the unidentified outlet were able to mitigate the cyber intrusion. Days after a Hindu resident of the northern Indian city of Gurugram offered his property to Muslims for Friday prayers, the city's Sikh community on Wednesday did the same. The Gurdwara Guru Singh Sahba said if Muslims were facing resistance to conducting prayers, then they could use the Gurdwaras. Over the past 2 months, Hindu extremists have disrupted Muslim prayers, forcing them to shut down at least 7 locations in the area. The United Nations World Food Programme Director laid out a $6.6 billion plan to combat world hunger this week. It's a direct response to Tesla CEO Elon Musk's claim that he would sell Tesla stock to fund a plan if the UN agency could describe how it would work. David Beasley, the UN Food Programs Director and former Republican governor of South Carolina, tweeted a link on Monday to a 1,000-word executive summary. It lays out how the UN would deploy $6.6 billion in meals and vouchers to feed more than 40 million people on the brink of famine across 43 countries. The agency proposed spending $3.5 billion to buy and deliver food directly, $2 billion for cash and food vouchers, and another $700 million to manage new food programs. Another $400 million would be used for operations management, administration, accountability, and supply chain coordination. In villages that once bore the brunt of Afghanistan's frontline fighting, the Taliban victory has broken a cycle of airstrikes, gun battles, and funerals. The group's takeover of Kabul in August and the sudden collapse of the US-backed government shocked the world. It upended the freedoms of Afghans, particularly enjoyed by the urban middle class. But away from major cities, little international aid worth billions of dollars ever reached. Many believe the hardliners' rule could bring a stop to the fighting and the hope for an end to corruption. Maki is a 72-year-old woman who prepares cotton fiber with other women in Dashtan. She told the AFP she would give everything for the Taliban. A trial for 24 aid workers is set to begin in Greece, offering a possible warning for those engaged in such efforts. It comes before the backdrop of Polish volunteers struggling to provide humanitarian relief to migrants who cross the border with Belarus. Some of the 24 aid workers are foreigners. They're being charged with espionage over their role in helping migrants who arrived in the country between 2016 and 2018. The trial was postponed on Thursday and is expected to be held in a court on Lesbos. The Greek island has been at the forefront of European migration crisis that began in 2015. Coming up next after the break is our in-depth analysis segment on the recent refugee crisis. So stay tuned and we'll be right back after these messages.
If I could be you, and you could be me for just 1 hour. If we could find a way to get inside each other's minds. Walk a mile in my shoes. Walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize, and accuse. Walk a mile in my shoes.
There are 16 million children struggling with hunger in America. That's 1 in 5 daughters, sons, neighbors, and classmates who don't know where their next meal is coming from. Yet billions of pounds of good food go to waste every year. It's time we do something about it. Feeding America is a nationwide network of food banks that helps provide meals to millions of kids and families in need. Visit feedingamerica.org to help them feed even more. Together, we can solve hunger. Together, we're feeding America.
Despite the development of a COVID-19 vaccine, millions around the world will not have access. We need a vaccine that's free and available to everyone, everywhere. It's time for a people's vaccine.
I am what hunger looks like in America. I am an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for the last day of school. Because this may be the last time I'll have lunch. Till September.
I am a single father of 2 who works 3 part-time jobs, and that's still not enough to put food on the table.
I was created by artificial intelligence from faces of the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger.
Feeding America, 200 food banks strong.
Welcome back. To discuss the ongoing refugee crisis in Europe, let's go to Imam Abdul Malik Mujahid, who's with Fen Hansen. Over to you, Imam Mujahid.
Thank you, Hena. There are about 5,000 people stuck on the door of European Union. European Union and Poland, being in front, don't want those people. While they're blaming Russia and Belarus by creating this confusion, these people are in a very difficult situation. Freezing weather, not many supplies, and they seems to have become a football between a three-way football in a way. They desire to enter Europe. They are from Syrian refugees, Afghan refugees, and some other people. And Belarus and Poland. I mean, they have been able, some gotten into Poland, some died actually, have been buried there. 12 people have died. So what is going on? So someone who keeps an eye on these issues, he is president of the World Refugee and Migration Council from Canada, Professor Fen Hansen. Welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Very good to be with you, Malik.
Tell us what is going on the borders of European unions about these refugees.
Well, what's happened is that these people have become a football in a political dispute between Belarus and the European Union, Poland in particular, because Poland borders on Belarus, has very tense relations with that country. Sanctions were imposed on Belarus following the rigged election that once again brought the dictator of that country, Alexander Lukashenko, to power. And he decided he would play nasty games by essentially flying Iraqis and others seeking refuge to his country with promises that they could then cross the border into the European Union. And as you pointed out, we're talking about thousands of people. They were moved by Belarusian authorities to the border with Poland, where they've been trying to get access. And Polish authorities, Poland has not been very welcoming of any refugees, quite frankly. A very different situation from Germany, which, as we know, brought over 1 million, welcomed over 1 million refugees to Germany. As a result, these very unfortunate people are in dire circumstances. They have not been able to cross the border. They've been subjected to water cannons, barbed wire, other kinds of measures that Polish authorities have taken. And I think it's fair to say nobody's looking really good in this. The European Union, Poland, obviously Belarus, which manufactured this crisis, essentially weaponized migrants, refugees, whatever you want to call them. And what has happened in the past 24 hours is that President Lukashenko has ordered that these people who've been living in very dire circumstances in cold weather, he has ordered them moved to warehouses where they can be fed, clothed, bathed, reportedly. But the question is, what's going to happen next? Some of them are already being sent back to where they came from. Many of them came from Iraq. Many of them are being sent back now to Iraq. We've seen, and again in the past 24 hours, pictures of these poor people, landing in back at the country they were trying to flee. So it's a very unfortunate situation, and I think the European Union and Poland do have some accounting here, because they've not handled this in a way that would respect the rights of these individuals.
What has changed in Europe since Germany accepted 1 million refugees, and now these few thousand people are not shown any mercy?
Well, I think it's fair to say that many of key what we would call Eastern European countries, Poland, Hungary, Austria, for that matter, have populations, leaders that are very hostile to refugees and foreign populations. We can call it xenophobic attitudes. They are, quite frankly, not in compliance with European Union laws and rules, and Europe is trying to figure out in its usual fashion, do we sanction these countries or not for not playing by the rules? Germany, France to a lesser degree, but they have been perhaps more open. Certainly the Germans have been very open, but former Chancellor Angela Merkel, paid quite a political price for it in the elections, and her party paid a price for it in the most recent elections, because in Germany there has also been a backlash against refugee populations in that country.
What role war is playing in the creation of refugees?
I'm sorry, I missed that question.
What role war is playing in the creation of refugees?
Well, I think the collapse of Afghanistan, obviously an ongoing conflict there, the ongoing conflict in Iraq following the U.S. invasion, which toppled Saddam Hussein, the ongoing civil war in Syria. Conflict has been a major driver people looking for a better life. It's also fair to say that, as the state collapsed in many of these countries where there were, serious ethnic divisions between Sunni, Shia, Kurdish communities, that sectarian strife has also been a contributing factor. And who can blame individuals who are living in very dire circumstances for trying to find a better life somewhere else, and that better life is to be found in Europe, in other Western countries. It's obviously much harder, much more difficult to get to the United States and Canada because there's a big ocean that you have to cross. But somewhat easier. I wouldn't say it's easy, but many of those refugees have come across the Mediterranean. In this particular case, in Belarusia, or Belarus, as we call it, this has been a manufactured crisis because the Lukashenko regime has actively been involved in flying and giving visas to Iraqis and others to come to Belarus with promises that they will get easy passage to Western Europe, which is where most of them want to go.
You mentioned refugee and immigrant both in the same sentence. I mean, you're part of you lead the organization which has both words.
Right.
Why people have been very particular about calling these people refugees, immigrants, and in some cases, irregular immigrants.
Right.
If the refugees, if people are uprooted because of war, they are more, fall into the categories of refugees, probably. So what is this battle with different words?
Right. So that's a very good point, Malik. I mean, a refugee typically is a person who is stateless, who is leaving a situation of persecution and conflict. There's a very technical definition in the Refugee Convention of 1951, which was based on the experience of the Second World War when it comes to characterizing who is a refugee and who isn't. In the case of the people who are in Belarus, they're referred to as migrants, and intentionally so, on the part of European and Polish authorities, because if you call them migrants, you're not subject to the same responsibility that you are if someone's a refugee and shows up in your country. You have to give them, essentially the right to stay, to be looked after. That legal obligation does not apply to to somebody who's referred to as a migrant. And of course, bureaucrats and officials love to play these word games, but let's face it, these are people who are on the run, are trying to leave, very difficult circumstances in their own country, looking for a better life. And, if you want to, put it in stark terms, Western societies are aging societies, and they should be much more welcoming. But we are living in an era of growing right-wing populism. That's true. Even in a country like Canada, which has had a very sort of progressive attitude towards and progressive policies towards migrants and refugees. There's the simple explanation is it's good old fashioned xenophobia, racism, whatever you want to call it, it's the ugly side of human behavior, and in these circumstances, it really does call for leadership, real leadership. I mean, Chancellor Merkel showed real leadership. She was prepared to do the unpopular thing, right now we don't have too many leaders who are prepared to do the unpopular thing and say, look, this is these people are victims, yes, the Belarusian authorities are playing games, but we're only talking about several thousands of people in a group of countries, the European Union, which is 500 million, could easily be absorbed, whether it's in Poland or somewhere else. My concern right now is what is going to happen to those people in Belarus, because they're not able to cross the border. Polish authorities are not going to take them. Many of them don't want to go home, so they're going to try to stay in Belarus. And how are they going to be treated there? I think we have to, continue to put pressure on Belarus, and we can tighten sanctions. We can impose sanctions against their financial institutions, which would be, their economy would take quite a hit. There are 5 major banks in the country, there really is a way to put the squeeze to say, you've got to respect the rights of these people, and it does mean, working with the Belarus government to ensure that, they're relocated to places of safety.
Do you think because of climate change, refugee crisis is going to even increase? And is the world ready for it?
I don't think the world is ready for it. We've just, had a major conference in Scotland, the Glasgow COP26 summit. Not a whole lot of discussion about how the world is going to respond to the challenges of migration and forcible displacement. We're seeing in the Western Hemisphere climate change wreaking havoc with the very poor countries of Central America. It's one of the reasons why people are on the move, heading northwards out of their countries. In many cases, these are rural farmers who can no longer survive, who are looking, for a better life somewhere else. We've already seen in sub-Saharan Africa, as a result of growing desertification, the Sahara Desert is growing. That has contributed to the movement of peoples, and also contributed to conflict in Sudan and other countries in the region. It's not the only factor. I mean, usually, forcible displacement, climate change, is accompanied by something you referred to earlier, ongoing chronic conflicts, sometimes it's between herders and nomads and others. We've seen this throughout history, these kinds of conflicts, but it's the speed and scale that I think we have to really be worried about, we're not ready for it.
Thank you so much, Professor Hampson, for your time.
My pleasure, Malik. Good to be with you.
Thank you. Back to you, Hena.
Thank you so much, Imam Mujahid and Mr. Hampson. That's all from our Washington studios tonight. Thank you for tuning in. You can find previous episodes and more on YouTube or Facebook. For more content, keep watching Muslim Network TV or visit muslimnetwork.tv. Assalamu alaikum and good night.